Hello and welcome. It's another episode of Lead with Storytelling podcast, and today it's a special one. So usually I have only one guest, but today I have the real pleasure um, to gather around the gatherings, a book that is at its heart about listening, relationship, and the courage it takes to sit with one another across differences. Today's conversation invites us not just to reflect on the stories in the book. You want to hold up? Yeah, copy. Awesome. It's not just, sorry. Today's conversation invites us not just to reflect on the stories in the book, but to think about what it means to come together, honestly, imperfectly, and with intention. I'm especially glad to be joined by three thoughtful voices whose lives and work reflect many of the themes this book holds. We have Shirley Hager, whose life and work are closely connected to the origins of the gatherings themselves. Growing up in the segregated American South, Shirley witnessed firsthand the injustice that shaped her lifelong commitment to social justice. Through her work with the Center for Vision and Policy, she helped organize the gatherings in their early years. She has spent much of her career as an educator and continues her work today in community dialogue and policy, including her role with Friends Committee on Maine Public Policy. We're also joined by Barb Martin, a Mi'kmaq woman from Burnt Church here in New Brunswick. Barb brings decades of experience working with communities, particularly in areas of healing, relationship building, and indigenous wellness. Through her work, from supporting residential school survivors to leading mental wellness initiatives, she has been deeply involved in creating spaces of care, resilience, and restoration. And we have Dr. Willow Anderson, a consultant, trainer, and researcher whose work is grounded in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Willow brings both a personal and professional lens shaped by her experience growing up in a culturally complex community in Labrador, where deep connection and difficult realities coexisted. Her work continues to explore how meaningful inquiry can lead to better outcomes for communities. Together, they bring perspectives shaped by lived experience, community work, and a shared commitment to understanding how we come together in meaningful ways. So today, as we begin, I'd like to hold a simple question for all of us. What does it mean to gather? Not just in presence, but in purpose. Again, welcome, my friends. Wonderful to be here. This is great. I read the book. I loved it. And we've had conversations prior to this recording, and um, again, I can't emphasize enough the value that this book continues to have long after it was published, long after even the gatherings ended, and that mere fact that it still holds that much weight of relevance is something that begs further conversation. And I believe that was what's really inspired bringing you all here to have this conversation. And I'm really honored. I'm grateful to Shirley, to Barb, for you know having been so integral, in the origins of the gatherings, in the writing of the book, the project, and also especially to Dr. Willow, who also brought this book my way by recommendation, and I can't thank her enough for being a book buddy, but a dear friend as well. And hopefully, in this conversation, we can all bring to bear the value of the experiences, the perspectives that we share around the themes discussed in the book. Now, so again, thank you so much for being here. And I'll hand off to you, Shirley. Want to talk a little bit more? Did I miss anything in your intro? Does it need an update?
Well, thank you, Sochi. I'm very pleased to be part of this conversation. It's wonderful
Yes,
to be
please.
here
Go
with
ahead.
my friend Barb and to get to know Willow a little bit better. Grateful that she brought this book to you. Would you like me to just say a little bit about how the gatherings came about, as well as the book? Okay. Well, in the 1980s, there was an organization in Maine that was focused on issues of sustainability. They wanted to bring together ideas of um, environmental, economic, and social sustainability and justice. Um, and one of their first decisions was that they wanted to have the Indigenous voice as part of that. And they also were unique in the fact that they weren't just focused on Maine, they were focused on the whole Gulf of Maine bioregion, which also is synonymous with Wabanaki territory. Um, the To make a long story short, um, the the Center for Vision and Policy, this organization, invited Wabanaki speakers initially to come speak to a largely non-native audience to talk about their history and our shared history. And that happened once a year for 2 years. But after that second forum, um, I was the one of the organizers of those forums. And after the second forum, some of the Wabanaki participants came to me and said, you know, we think this has promise, but we would like to meet in a way. If we're to continue, we'd like to meet in a way that we're more comfortable with, we're more familiar with. And so they invited us to engage in a gathering that was more of a traditional council meeting, and that they would provide the structure. They would take the lead on how we met, and our job would be to get people there. Um, so this we accepted that invitation happily, and this resulted in 11 gatherings total over 7 or 8 years in the 1980s and 90s. We we abandoned the formal way of meeting. We found people who had farms or land that we could meet on, and we all came together on these long weekends, arriving on a Thursday afternoon and meeting through Sunday. Um, with no agenda except to get to know one another as people and to listen to one another. The indigenous participants took the lead, and they wrapped our gatherings with ceremony, and we spent hours and hours every day simply going around the circle and sharing our lives. Um, it was a profound experience for me, and from what I understand, profound for many of the participants. And the gatherings ended in that form in 1993. But during that time, relationships had formed among us that really sustained us. We visited in each other's homes as we traveled. We got involved in projects together. In some cases, people started projects together in Maine and the Maritimes. Um, and it was in 2008 that some of us happened to be at this event in Maine, and we started talking about the fact that we needed to tell this story of what we had learned, what we had experienced, and what we had learned. And so the result was that 15 of us, seven Wabanaki, seven indigenous people, seven non native, as well as our friend Francis Hancock, who wound up writing our afterword, but was very much a participant in the gatherings. Um, we came together to write a book about our experience. That started in 2008. The process of doing the book, which we can talk more about, was completed in 2013 when we finally had a book in hand. And
Thanks a lot for that.
we
And
each
you
told the
spoke about
story of our
these
experience
relationships that
and the
were forged,
lessons we learned
in
from
the
our
process. And I know that
experience
Barb
that we feel is still relevant
happens to be
today.
one of those, recipients or benefactors of this blessing of relationships. Bob, you want to chime in here? How did you get involved? I know you contributed to the book, and I,
Hmm.
read your reflections as well, on your experience during the gatherings. Do share.
First of all, it's really great to hear from Shirley because you have to have a heart and soul in a book, the one that facilitates the gathering, the facilitator. And basically, how I see the book is that the gatherings is it's like a big talking circle that continued on after, the talking circles that Shirley was describing. And again, as I indicated in previous conversations, was actually just at first, an observer, invited by one of the Wabanaki participants or organizers that Shirley was working with. I was good friends with Kisitanamuk and Mi'kmaq, who are key in a lot of the activities going on. And we were much younger, obviously. And I accompanied them to some of these gatherings. And also, I was involved with drum and chanting groups. I would be participating in some way. My role actually became much more prominent after and during the book, when the writing of the book. And I think my role was, I was more impacted by that and by my growing relationships with Shirley and others as they embarked on this transformative journey. And for those who don't know who Wabanaki are, they are the Mi'kmaq, the Willistic Way, formerly known as Maliseet, the Penobscots, the Passamaquoddy, and the Abenaki. And we used to have a confederacy, and we still do. We still have confederacy meetings that occur around the different regions. So these Wabanaki participants were involved in this. And I have to say, as I was listening to Shirley, that really this is history. We are living in history still. And so these 30 some odd years that have passed is just a small part of the historical relationships that have occurred between us and among us and will continue to occur. And so we lived through all of that history. Shirley and I share that about the situation in the United States at the time when she was experiencing segregation in North Carolina and what from her perspective. And I was living in the United States for during a significant time of the civil rights movement, as I describe in the book. And when desegregation began to happen, so I was part of that being bussed into white communities because I was being schooled in the ghetto communities. So it was, even after that, it is continuing to go on. And I don't, and one of the things that I want to acknowledge is, in terms of what Shirley had said, those relationships continued was during in my community of Eskinwobadich, or Burnt Church, as it was formerly called. There was in one period of time a conflict between my community and the Canadian government, and we were having boats rammed out of and people being shot at. And so this again is historical because it was based on a Supreme Court decision here called the Marshall decision. And as a result, we could go and go out and fish, and we were fishing lobster. We called that the lobster wars at the time. Well, Shirley and the gang from Maine and other areas, but we came as part of what they call the Christian peacekeepers to observe. And I think, again, they were right at the front lines. I was not there. Shirley was. Shirley was right there as they were shooting at people and observing, like you would have in the United Nations observers. That was Shirley. And this is where I think where you can say the rubber hits the road. This is where these people prove to us that they were with us, that they understood, that they were going to be, they were putting their bodies on the line. And I think from that point, I said, these are good people. I will, they are worth knowing. They're my friends. We went behind what the racial lines. After a while, you forget they're white. And that I used to be quite a little advocate and activist, and with a boulder on my shoulder, as I used to call it. But I think I was transformed by this experience of the book. And I have to thank Shirley and others for that experience of dealing with that, I would say, hatred. And hatred is a terrible thing to have. And hatred against white people for all the harm that was done is also something that really churns up inside of you. And as a younger woman, that was something that I had to deal with and go through what is called the forgiveness ceremony that we have. I mean, I didn't go through the formal one, but this book helped me through my own ceremony of reimagining Indigenous-settler relations, as the book is called. So that's my chiming in after Shirley.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, you touched on so many themes, and you've more or less summarized a few of these themes that occur in the book. One of them, trauma. I mean, this just speaks to how much in the different ways that we come into the book, or even the book comes to us, or the stories there come to us and touch us. And especially for me, not just personally, but also professionally, when I look at, the consideration of these other ways of coming together or bringing people together, which I have to do in my, in my 9 to 5 or in my professional life, but even personally. And I love the way you coined the word, or the phrase living history. And, living history, meaning this is something that these are issues that we are living in and experiencing even presently, and we're having to deal with. But it's always a comfort to have a resource, a tool that helps us to navigate. And at this point, want to invite Dr. Willow to talk about, especially when we talk about this living history and how the themes, the issues tackled, the triumphs, the lessons in the book help us, try to understand the times that we are living in today. And as a professional, as a consultant, I know she deals with a lot of these issues around belonging, and equity and inclusion. Willow, how did you find the book? I mean, how do you find the book to be relevant in these times? Interesting times too.
Thank you so much. If you see me looking off to the side, it's me scurrying with notes, because I just love what everybody's sharing so much, writing down keywords. And I mean, I read the book a couple years ago, I guess, Barb, it must have been you originally who'd recommended that I read it. And I'm really grateful for that, because I don't know if I would have fallen upon it on my own. And it is a very, very important book. And I've recommended it to many
Why
people.
not be a chain of recommendations? Because I'm definitely
Yes.
through this platform also going to recommend to a lot of other people too.
If we did a string of connection, our screen would be like a web right now. Yeah.
Yeah, how it goes.
Um, and so, yeah, read the book. And so this was, goodness, I'm trying to remember. When did you say it was published, Shirley? 2021. Okay. So I probably read it in 2023, I want to say, maybe. And somewhere around there. And at that time,
2021.
and I would say it's more relevant now, but at that time, it was extremely important. It meant a lot to me, as someone who does, as you mentioned, Sochi, sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion work, really hoping to further and deepen belonging within communities and organizations. And as I read it, so I read it, I guess, with a professional lens, sort of thinking, oh, these are the kinds of conversations that need to happen. Of course, my personal life, I'm thinking that as well. I'm also mother to an Indigenous child. And so thinking about Indigenous, non-Indigenous relations is often in the forefront of my thinking. So I guess the professional and personal lens, it spoke to both. And as I read about the gatherings, at that time, I thought, wow, this is something I've been yearning for, like these gatherings, this kind of deep honesty and connection, and and I mean the good parts and the hard parts, because I think those are good parts. Like one of the beautiful things about the book is when people admit, like, I fooled up here, or there was tension here, or we pushed too far, or we didn't ask the right questions, or we charged forward without asking, and then the finding out about the repair. I don't think everything necessarily got repaired, but the attempts at repair, how those relationships then were deepened as people realized their mistakes and thought, wow, how might we do this differently? How might we as a group or as an individual move forward with more integrity? That was some of my favorite parts of the book, because to me, it's that messiness that's the reality of what it is to be in conversation and relationship with people with different lived experiences. So all that to say that I read that, let's say in 2023, and then the last couple of years, because of what's happening south of the border, our worlds need this book, to me, more than ever, because there's a permission now to slip back, if you like, in some circles, right? To say, we don't need that stuff. Let's quash this. Let's paint over this mural. Let's reduce support for all of what I consider essential movements forward. So because there's a permission to slip backwards into these systems that have been very harmful, I think the book is more relevant than ever. And so I think I may reread it as a form of reaching out for hope, and for potential models for how we might move forward.
Thanks a lot for that. I mean, and from my own perspective, I wear many hats, as it were, or I read the book as many personalities. As a father, as an immigrant, as a communication professional, media professional, as even a man. And the book touches different notes, for each of these different personalities that I wear as a skin. And it's really interesting to find any book that can actually touch all or check all notes, all these notes, hit all these notes. As personally, to find a book that touches on how trauma is being passed from generation to generation, it's usually something that is being glossed over, especially in nonfiction, or even hinted at in fictive genres. But it's really, calls you to slow down and think and reflect when you hear someone, a real person, actually reflect on how they've carried trauma through different generations to this present time, and then find a platform, find this opportunity to share it and still feel the full brunt of that weight. And for me, it's quite it's humbling. And at the point where I'm learning a lesson is where you find that it comes out through the form of storytelling. And, we find new ways to share these pains, to share these guilts, to share these scars, but also find these other ways of finding healing. And that's the hopeful thing about it. And for me, it's a good, not to say that all these issues come away, or you come away, feeling that these issues are fully resolved, but that there is hope. As long as you have the people who are kind and generous in their spirits to share their experiences through the stories that they share, you know that there is hope, that even when you go through these pains, these struggles day by day, personally, and maybe even whatever kinds of challenge you find also professionally, if as Willow, in your own line of work where it involves bringing people together to talk about these hard issues, you know that there, at least you have some comfort in having a tool that helps you to navigate such challenges. And hopefully, there can be solutions that can be talked around, and at least, stave off the storm, while we can put those differences aside so that we can have these conversations and look for the solutions that move us forward. So again, Shirley, Bob, and all the contributors, this was a gift, and this is a gift. And I know that, as we've said, through this string and network of recommendations that we're making, I'm very confident and I'm grateful that this tool will also, or this resource, will be made available to a whole lot more people. Yes, please.
Sochi, could I what you're saying just reminded me, and excuse me, I found this quote from Gisatanamuk, and Gisatanamuk was, I sort of thought of us as the co-organizers of the gatherings, and he was really the one who was most involved in creating the ceremonial container that held us through these meetings. But he ends his story, his personal story in the book, with these words: "My hope is that those who read this book, native and non-native, see that people like themselves came away from this process inspired in ways that have changed their lives. I hope this book enables people to say, okay, others have been here before, so we know it's possible. It's possible because they did it." And I think that was our deepest hope in creating the book, was that we could demonstrate that it's possible for people to come together even when there are differences in power and privilege, and with deep tragic history between them. um, and it's it is the reason that the University of Toronto Press said to me they wanted to publish the book, was that they didn't know of any other example of people coming together across these differences that held together over time. That, there you can find examples of stories of people that come together around a conflict, and they work together, and they make some improvement or progress. But then when the issue's resolved, people kind of go their own way. And this was a story of people finding, I think, a deeper connection that led us to want to be friends and family and to stay together throughout the process of this book, creating this book, which was we held a very high standard for participation in this book, and every person in it had full authority and rights over their words. And if there was something they didn't want in the book, it didn't go in the book. And then everyone had to approve the book as a whole. And so not only how they were represented, but the book as a whole. So it went back and forth a lot of times, but we were committed to that process, so that I think the final product, people feel
Yeah, I believe you
ownership
should
in
be.
it.
You should
That's
be
my
proud. I
deepest
mean,
hope,
and
and
Mm.
that's
speaking
what
of
people have
pride
said.
that you
So
can
we're
take
very
with you to the
proud
bank,
of that.
I think I'm grateful.
Yeah, but it ain't gonna. It isn't making a lot of money until,
Not that much to the
and even the
bank.
royalty checks were, even though they're not,
Well,
all
not
those.
You didn't. Nobody wrote
no,
you a check.
no.
Oh man, why you
We
don't?
knew.
Why did you even?
Oh, there have been
Except the exchange
a little
rate.
bit,
Oh,
but
well,
nothing that was
that
too
goes with Donna.
difficult to
It's
take to
always
the
yeah.
bank.
I know. But if you
If
would,
I could just add to
yes, please.
Yeah.
Shirley's thought, I was, whenever we chat on these sort of things, because we have had this duo happen a couple of times in different webinars or podcasts. I think I keep learning new things, and one of the things I think you spoke on it. So she is that you talk about historical trauma, intergenerational trauma. Yes, but we're all experiencing intergenerational trauma. I said before, and I'll say it again: racism is mental illness. It is an insanity. It people don't, when you're racist, you are in essence mentally ill, and it's people are really proud of it nowadays in some parts of the world. I'm crazy and I love it. I'm going to go kill you, or hurt you or something along those lines, but that's basically what it is. You're insane. And I had to deal with that myself. I had to go look at my unconscious bias. And I think that is what the group did, is they began to explore and have the courage to address unconscious bias and privilege in some cases and so on, and learned how to look at one another as human beings and create a connection. And I think that's what was so emotional about it for some of our friends who are not indigenous, is this was the first time they felt connected. And I say that in the book, when I began to have those insights. And when you start to feel that connection with another human being, and that warm feeling of we are family, we can go beyond all of that history a little bit to see each other, li- actually see each other, then that is quite an emotional feeling, because we're also lonely out there, especially in this era of social media where we're all not connected and only connected through this means. So that was one of the things that I'm also thinking: spirituality. Nobody, like, that word, what does it mean? For, like, I think that was one of the things that we learned as well through this process, is the realm of spirit and spirituality, that connection to however we perceive creation to be, was another powerful aspect. And the earth connects us, and creation connects us beyond race and gender and all of that messy stuff that tries to divide us. So I think that it may have touched you, Soshi, because I think you might have sensed something in that book, and Willow would have sensed something else as well in this book. What is it that this bunch of people gained from this experience over time? And we're older. I'm not that young woman that was there in the 1990s. I'm much in a different place. My point of view now is end of life issues another 20 years or something. And so, you get really spiritual around this time, don't you? When you face those mortality issues. And again, it's like a cycle. It's a circle. We're continuing on that talking circle. And for me, the conversation, it deepens and it evolves to meaningful things. And I think, as Willow has said, it's very relevant in today's world. And for us as Indigenous people, and it's in the book as well, and it's not Christian. We're not necessarily Christian as Indigenous people. We've been converted. A lot of our spirituality has been forced underground or denigrated, but we're in a time of what our elders have said is prophecy. Indigenous people have foretold we would be at this time and place. And so it needed people who can who can reach out to each other and do the work we need to do to find a balance again. And I think I found my gang. My gang is Shirley and all the others, and to do this kind of work. And we want to expand our gang to reflect to reconnect, to feel whole again, to love, not in that romantic kind of like love that is out there in Western civilization during the Renaissance and all of that stuff. I'm a history buff, but truly unconditional love. That is so healing. When you touch on that, when you experience that in that moment, and I think surely you experienced that, what does that do for one? That is healing in so many ways. So I just wanted to add on to Shirley's points. I'm going to say I love that woman. I really think that she is one of the most awesome human beings I've ever met. And that is like, and to say that, and for me to say that about a white woman is like, wow.
Oh my gosh, Barb. But I feel the same way about you.
That's
Well, I certainly feel the same way about you, Barb. And I just can't believe that we've known each other for over 40 years and are still having these conversations. And I'll just say that I was thinking as you were talking that I say this in the book, I remember sitting in those circles. I remember moments when I said it felt like a wound was healing in me that I didn't know was there. And that's what you're talking about. I think that wound of separation. And when people who have every reason to despise you or fear you or whatever negative emotion that people would carry from our history, and when they reach out to you and offer um, compassion, love, understanding, it's a powerful thing. And then I had no idea. I mean, I knew what I had gained from that experience and what other non-native people had said to me about what it was meaning for them to be in those circles. But when we started having conversations to create the book, um, I had some of the indigenous people talk about, and it's in their stories, what it meant to them. And at the time, I had no idea. But, them telling stories of, it was the first time that they had felt truly listened to by a white person, that they had felt respected, or that someone thought that what they had to offer was of equal benefit. And that up to that point, some of the Native people in the gatherings, their only experience of white people had been as priests or nuns or social workers in the community, and not not ever as friends, and not ever as equals. And it was, and they were open about saying what that meant to them. And I was caught by surprise by that. I didn't know. So there
I would
was
like
a lot
to
of
expand a little
mutual
bit more.
healing,
I know we
I
joked
think,
about
going on
taking
there.
taking this pride to the bank, but there is a lot to be said about the legacy of this initiative, this project, and a lot to be proud, about proud for. And I will throw this question to Willow, maybe as a starting point, and then please feel free to jump in at any time. To me, when the book read like it had a twist, and the twist was that this very special project ended. And learning that, because there was no inkling. Okay, there was in the beginning, because I know I was my mind does this thing when when the tenses don't read right. So when you refer to something in the past tense, and especially when you start a book that way, I thought it was a mistake. I came into this book thinking of thinking that this is a program, or this is a project that is ongoing and has a lot to offer. This is how you can how you can connect or engage with it, the organizers. But then I kept coming back to those tenses, in the past tense, and it didn't read right. So I ignored it. I think it was psychological. I ignored it until, plot twist, this project ended for these reasons. And like, okay, so it ended. That was a downer for me. But I'm not asking as my next question to make everyone feel bad. Please don't. I'm asking in essence because the topic of what the legacy of this project is something to be joyful for. And I want to ask Willow if you can hint at what you feel some of the, not just lessons, but some of the legacies that this project has actually, in your estimation, has actually set in motion.
Yeah, that's a difficult question because I mean the beautiful thing about a book is it can go anywhere, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
now that it's in book form, I think there'll be no way for its authors and those who participated in these gatherings to fully know all of its impacts, and that I think is sort of beautiful, even though as a researcher, I kind of want to follow the tendrils, right? As you guys may be curious too, but I think there will be lots of impacts that you don't know about because it'll be in someone's personal experience, maybe, and how they carry themselves in the world and in their interactions with others. Um, and then I do hope that it will have, I'll say, organizational, cultural, institutional legacy too. And Shirley can speak to the teacher's guide that's been created. So that's another level of legacy, which I think is really beautiful. But I do hope that some people read the book and think, oh, how might we create something like this? And not to appropriate it, but to be inspired and to say, well, what worked, what didn't work, how might this be useful in some form in the place where I am. And I will say, slightly as a joke, but not a joke, I'm going to continue giving it to my Indigenous friends and sort of say, text me if you want to talk. Because I think at some point someone is going to read this book and say, yeah, let's do this, or let's do something like this again. I don't know how that feels for those who created it, but I just feel like it should live on in a really tangible form in other gatherings. Do they have to be? Can they ever be like that? No. But can they be something of now, of today? And sadly, as much as we have come far in some parts since the 90s, there are some areas we haven't made much movement at all. And so, again, it just speaks to the need for these kinds of ways of coming together. I'd love to hear what Shirley and Barb think. It's the first time I've confessed out loud that I'm giving the book to people that I hope will say, let's do it.
Bob, what do you think? What are some of these maybe surprises as well as to, in terms of ways that people have actually, like testimonials, have actually continued the legacy of this project?
Yeah, I want to first of all reassure you. So I could, say, is there a happy ending? Did they continue on? Did what happened afterwards? Well, the book happened, the relationship, and we're having these webinars and these podcasts, so it's still carrying on. Shirley sometimes has it with Kisitan Mugan, and that is so. When they speak, it's poetry. It's like I grew up a little bit in the ghetto areas of New Haven, Connecticut, so I did have a little bit of a little whatever in your face kind of attitude. I'm not that wise old Indian woman stance that I try to throw that stereotype out the window. But this is important work, and Willow has really said it. It's still going on, and it has a legacy, even beyond the time, me and Shirley's time, hopefully, because for us, time is for Indigenous people is not a big thing. We're talking about 7 generations. Some of what we do today has reverberations across time and space. I don't want to get metaphysical here, but we believe that. And so I think that even beyond the book, the relationships we had and the work we do, I'm involved in systems change. I'm involved in changing things that will do necessary work as a result of a lot of what has happened in the past. So, and other people also are doing and evolving. So it hasn't ended for us, it's just ongoing. So, Shirley?
Yeah, I agree with what Barb said 100%. That and people do ask me about the end of the gatherings a lot. And you know, I say everything has its time, and things end so that other things can begin. And one thing about the gatherings was that they were kind of under the umbrella of a mostly white organization, the Center for Vision and Policy. And that was always a little bit of a tension, like who is this group, and um, what authority do they have to bring people together? And even though the gatherings kind of took on a life of their own, but I always felt like it would be better if we were being invited by Indigenous people to participate in their efforts. And that, in fact, it happened literally when Alma, um, um, Wolastoqey woman in the book, Maliseet woman, she was the main organizer for the Wabanaki Confederacy to meet for 2 years in her reserve in New Brunswick. And she, for the first time, because she was in that role and had been part of the gatherings, she invited non-native people to join them the last day of their gathering. And then beyond that, I mean, in Maine, we have many examples now of indigenous leadership, Wabanaki leadership that are, for one thing, trying to change the obstacles in this settlement act that holds them back, and that has created a coalition of over 350 churches, businesses, organizations supporting them. So there's opportunities for us to join with them. And so, and that feels right. And I agree with Barb that there are ways that this book is continuing to live on. And Willow mentioned the teacher's guide. I did a presentation it was like a professional development day for a regional teachers group. And some of the members of the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association got hold of the book, wrote a grant, and themselves created a teacher's guide that accompanies the book. And it's available on our website, free of charge for anyone to download. It was reviewed by 2 Wabanaki scholars before they put it out. So we have that. And I do, Sochi, want people to have our website and to also know that a couple of years ago, we embarked on a project of making it into an audiobook. And we ourselves didn't do that, but the publisher contracted for that. And we had professional readers reading for us. And so you can find that on Audible. It's another way to access the book.
I'll definitely link to the resources, the teacher's guide, the audiobook, and even the actual book for people to click and buy, and and also get a hold of for use. Thanks a lot for that. Another, and we started off by saying, just touching on all the different ways, all the different layers to the themes discussed in the book. And let's not, you've also hinted at some of the rest as well, but, also for me, it was also a history lesson. So I'm an immigrant, and, it's beneficial for me to understand the value of being grateful, grateful to original settlers or the owners of land that I'm hoping to make a life on. And it made sense to me reading that part of the book as well, talking about the value of being grateful. And I love how it made sense to also expand on gratitude and its value in this lens. Even to the extent of talking about how it impacts sustainability, which is a core even in my professional life as a media and communications and media professional as well. And then moving on from there, as I said, a history lesson, also talking, learning about decrees that precipitated, precipitated the beginnings or the origins of traumas that have been experienced and passed down. And also finding that, even in these times, there is a glimmer of hope. And I speak especially about, and I'm talking especially about the reputations that have also been recorded as some of the progress made so far in efforts to reverse the effects of these decrees and, harmful mindsets. And also other efforts that are being made, are being made, to continue the work. So thanks again. We have that. And I wondered, Willow, was there were these other things that also surprised you and gave you some hope, as discussed in the book, especially with regards to the efforts being recorded?
Sorry, do you mean the in reading the book, specific
Yeah,
things that gave me hope?
yeah.
Mm. Um, I mean, I mentioned before, but maybe it's worth mentioning again. To me, the seeing where some of the friction existed, I would say, and the honesty around that, and then the seeing people's efforts or to either see things differently or approach someone in relationship differently, or recognize what harm had been done and how might repair happen, how might we move forward. um, because that to me, I love in your introduction to all of this, actually. So she used three words and I've already lost one, but I wrote down two. You said how the gatherings people came together honestly and imperfectly. And there was one other thing. And I thought, oh, it's so good. And to me, it's the imperfection that's the honesty to a certain extent, right? Because we're human. Most of us have not been brought up to understand how to interact across difference in meaningful ways, in respectful ways, in honest ways. um, and so to see that learning for folks through these processes, to me, was really meaningful. um, and the continuing to come back, so even if the gatherings ended, that's okay, but in those gatherings, there was a back and forth and a push and a pull, and that to me is the humanity of it. And seeing that as an example, not as failure, to just say, okay, well, I fooled up. Now what do I do to continue moving forward? Because this means something to me. I think that as living in multiracial, even if you don't like that word, I don't love it, but multiracial, multicultural, diverse spaces, like that is what it is to be together. If we want to be together and be together in meaningful and important ways, there are going to be mistakes, um, and then what do we do then?
And that's great. Well, we started off by, kind of riffing off on these recommendations and the power of networking. And we've already been able to draw in a map of the recommendation strings and network. Just as a way to kind of warm down, let's talk a little bit about recommendations. One of the comps or comparisons that I've been able to make while after reading this was there's one book I was kind of reminded of after reading this was The Telling. I forget her name. It's T, and it's I know it's a native name. So forgive me. I could quickly Google it, and I'll remember before the end of this. The Telling. I think it came out 2024. I read it last year, I believe, and it was written by. She's a journalist, and she wrote extensively about the reconciliation efforts that have been made, how long it's taken, especially the government of Canada to actually make good on its promises with regards to reconciliation, and what efforts have been made also by other parties who were complicit, including the Catholic Church and their own efforts as well. She dedicated, I think, 2 or so chapters to talking about the trip by First Nation elders to Rome on the invitation of the papacy, and so that was one book that really opened my eyes, because again, the book and the gathering itself also talks about the evil of appropriation, but not just that, but also the evil of performative acknowledgement. And having read that, I was reminded of this other book that also tried to talk and expand on these issues. So that's my recommendation. We're gonna go around the table. So I know I didn't prepare you for this. I'm sorry, but I feel like everyone really has something at the tip of their tongue. Bob, you want to go next?
I'll do a brief. truth and reconciliation, it's prefaced by truth. First, you have to tell the truth, and you have to accept that that is the truth. Truth might be perceived differently, but those residential school survivors and their families came forward to tell their truth. And then all the others began to speak on that of what horrible government policies and colonialism can do to human beings that they encounter and to themselves in the end when they create their systems to perpetuate that. But the truth has to be told, and then we have to, what do we do with that truth? And how do we reconcile with that truth? And it happens on many different levels. It happens in, here in the with the heart and the mind coming together internally, with our families, with our communities, with our nation and creation. It's a spiral. So people aren't used to that thinking, looking at it from that point of view, but that it has to happen. And it is happening, whether we like it or not. We're at a time now where the earth is telling us, the earth mother is telling us, you're going to change or else. And so we're at that point in time that I referred to earlier. And so whether the Canadian government accepts it or not, it's going to happen, and they're going to have to respond to environmental crises, all of those things happening in the world today. They're responding to the insanity of a bunch of people in I'm sorry, in the United States. Sorry, Shirley, you have to live there. You know, the that is that's truth coming out, right? So we're there, and so how do we then act? And that, the book is one way, and the telling that is another, but we accept the hard realities, then we must act with with good heart and good intention. And we keep in mind, good intentions can, where they can go, it has to be followed up by values of respect and caring and sharing and courage and all the seven sacred teachings. We have it all that we can share. But really, at the final analysis, I'm going to say this. What is the legacy that we are going to look back on when it's time for us to to meet our maker? However we perceive that maker to be. We can't bring our money with us. We can't bring our stuff with us. At the end, you have to face yourself. What is the legacy that I can say with little or no regret that I did the very best that I could as a human being in this creation? I don't know if that answers your question, but
Oh, no, no, definitely. Willow?
I'm a little torn because I feel like I should be recommending something around Indigenous and non-Indigenous relations, but
It could be that. It could be tangential. You never know.
yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I think
Funny how those intertext really work.
mm, I one of the most important books that I've read in the last few years that feels relevant, even if it's not specifically about these kinds of relationships. It's about, but it is about how we move forward with each other. Is My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Menakem, and he's a somatic therapist, and among many other things. That doesn't feel like it does enough, but and so his work centers around how we have and this is a colonial thing, we've led with the mind, right? That we've sort of elevated the mind as being the thing in us that is primary and should be led with. And he's saying that true healing, and particularly racial healing, the ways that we've been harmed from these nasty racialized systems, have to be fixed in the body. And that if we don't heal from the body, then we'll be stuck. Because we're not going to, we can't intellectualize our way out of it because we are carrying the traumas of our histories. So that's, I guess, why I was thinking about that book, right? Our bodies hold that. Um, And we know it's not only in the teaching, right? It's not always in how our parents brought us up and what they were able to give us or not give us. Epigenetics tells us that how our body understands our genes is actually modified because of the experiences of our ancestors. So he talks about how we might heal that and how that will help us be better humans and coming together with each other. So that's a long description, but that's my pitch for My Grandmother's Hands, a very important book.
I'd like to make an edit to the title of the book. It's the Knowing by Tanya Talaga, not the Telling, sorry. It's The Knowing by Tanya Talaga. Shirley?
So you're asking for recommendations for moving forward? Is that?
Yes. So it's, by way of, yeah, sure, by that directly, or even by way of an analogy with the book, or if you like, but either way it works.
Well, when I think about what I could say to that is that when we're talking about people who have been held back, oppressed, have less privilege in the culture, that my recommendation is to listen to what they are saying and believe what they are saying. And moreover, take direction from what they know by virtue of where they are. I feel that we have so much, if we're going to save ourselves as a species, we have so much to learn from the people who have been on the land where we're sitting for millennia, and from their language and the knowledge and the wisdom that's contained in their language. And every day I spend more of my time now with things like the Quakers, the Friends Committee on Maine Public Policy, for example. We follow legislation in Maine that the Wabanaki tribes are trying to put forward, and support that legislation in whatever way we can. And it is such a grind for them because there's such a lack of trust. Our system is set up to just further the advantages and the privileges that the majority or the white culture hold. And for there to be a change in that system is such a long and arduous process. And I watch year after year the tribes in Maine throwing so much effort and money and time toward making those changes. And so we need to engage in efforts that are mutually beneficial, and we need to listen to what people are saying about the impact of our system on them, and to learn to take direction from them, because in many cases they know best. And that is one thing I think we learned in the gatherings and really tried to practice in our interactions and going forward. And one of the lessons we hope we captured in the book to pass on.
Thank you so much, Shirley. Bob, Willow, I know we could go on and on. I feel like we could just go on and on and on. And I know that we'll have another occasion to have this roundtable again to converge and talk around these issues that mean so much to us, as anybody who's listening can tell. But unfortunately, I want to be respectful of each of our times. Again, I want to say thank you so much. It's been a blessing to come across this book and also to have met you all. And I want to thank you for the gift of your stories and the gift of your time and wisdom. I can't thank you enough. So
thank you, Sochi. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
A real pleasure.
Thank you, Sochi. And Willow.
Thank
for bringing this up.
you.
And
Absolutely.
Shirley again.
And Barb again.
I'm Bob again. Okay, we can keep going on.
Mhm.